Greetings, and welcome to another video. And today, I'm going to be talking to you about bunkai. Now, bunkai is a principle from karate. It is the practical application of kata. Now, kata is a controversial subject in karate, to say the least. On one hand, you have a lot of people that say that it's the most important thing that you should be training, and that you have to, and that it takes importance over everything else. And on the other hand, you have people that say that it's useless and that you really shouldn't bother training it because it's not going to make you a good fighter. I'm somewhere in the middle. I do see it as a useful training method, but on the other hand, I don't think it's the most important. If I had to compare it to anything, I'd say it's about the same usefulness as a speed bag, because it's roughly the same purpose. But you see, bunkai is how you make kata useful. Because if you could train your kata to the point where you're doing it perfect. But if you don't train your kata with the mindset of the practical application, the second it's time to use that kata in an actual fight, you aren't going to be using it that well. Which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, I'm going to start this off with the first kata that I learned, taikyoku shodan. It is as far as I know, the first kata that you learn in Shotokan karate, my main style. Now, interesting thing about bunkai in a lot of karate styles is it's not striking. Something that a common misconception held by a lot of people, specifically modern martial artists, is that karate is all about punches and kicks. But it's not. It's an all-encompassing, traditional karate at least, is an all-encompassing martial art that includes striking, grappling, and even submission holds, ground fighting, all of it. Of course, as time goes on, we lost parts of what made karate the amazing martial art that it once was, that made the old masters nigh unstoppable to the average person. Well, until they had weapons, in which case it's kind of even. Well, not really even, depending on what the weapon was. But okay, I digress because I don't want to get at a loss here. But now, nowadays kata's more about form rather than function. I mean, if you look at the old footage of people practicing kata, it looked sloppier, when compared to the modern day, kata, that you see. Whereas we nowadays we don't see it, done with as much intent. Because back in the day, they were practicing it for the practical application, whereas now it's more about just practicing the technique, rather than, you practicing it for the bunkai. Now, let's get into the actual bunkai for taikyoku shodan. Now, not counting footwork, taikyoku shodan only has 2 techniques, which makes sense. It's the starter kata. Those techniques are, I'm going to have to do this slow because my arm's still messed up, but the only techniques you see are the leg block, and then the, straight, front punch. I think it's oizuki in Japanese. I don't know, my Japanese is pretty rusty. Now, as far as the bunkai goes, you gotta look at the techniques, beyond what they look like. Now this, it's a punch. I'm not going to say, stand here and say that this isn't a punch. Obviously, it's a punch. And since it's the only definitive strike in the kata, it's meant to be powerful and meant to be used as just a punch. Specifically, as far as I can tell, it's meant to be aimed here at the solar plexus, which is a good target because you can't grow muscle there. The lungs are right there. And with all the nerves, it's easy to knock the wind out of a person with a punch here, especially if it's well placed. But the leg block here is where it gets interesting, because this can be a lot of things. Switching positions here. You're going to have to do this slow. Now, when you ask a person what this technique is for, generally, if you're asking traditional karate guys, they'll say it's a block to the leg, usually for a low kick. And that makes sense. It can be used for that, and generally, if a person's throwing a low kick in karate, this is what we would do to block it if we were blocking it. Generally, we would just move out of the way because that's more often than not the best thing to do in that situation. Especially since a lot of karate guys have a sideways stance. Me, I go more like this, but I move on. I digress. But that, while that is one option, there are still more. Now, first, now let's break down the movement step by step. First, this arm goes down here. This arm goes up here. Then, around here they separate. And then this one gets pulled back, and this gets extended. But let's move it back a bit to here. If I move this way, tell me, all the boxers who are watching this, what does this look like? It looks a lot like a Philly shell, which is why I think it's fair to say that this can be used to block shots to the stomach and chest as well, specifically jabs, because that's what one of the main things that Philly shells are good for, block defending body jabs. And I think it's fair to say that that this can be used to block and then put it down, send the arm down, opening up for the strike. Now that, of course I could just be seeing things. So what's another thing? Well, in my karate style, I was taught to always treat a block with like a strike, in the sense of using the same amount of force for the block as I would for a strike. Because for two reasons. One, if you don't that much force into your block, it's gonna cave under the force of the strike. If it has has the same amount of force behind it, or a higher amount. And if they're swinging a weapon at you, it's going then your block's not going to do anything. But for the other reason being, for an old Okinawan phrase, which translates to "a block is a lock, as a blow is a throw," which basically means any technique can be used for anything. So this could be meant similar to a hammer fist. That hurt. Now, you could be doing a low hammer fist, maybe directed at the legs or to the lower body. Maybe they're at a sideways stance. Maybe they moved here. Here to where they're partially in front of. Maybe you moved here to where you're partially in front of, partially behind them, and you throw it low to the body or to the leg. Maybe you drop into a lower stance and throw that at their knee or their thigh or their groin, as karate guys like to do. So this can be a block, but it can also be a strike. And finally, I have this one is technically this is two, but I want to talk about them as the same thing. Now, there's a big misconception that karate is all about punches and kicks, but no, it's an all-encompassing martial art, and it includes grappling. And if you look at the techniques, the technique here, this arm goes like this when you start off the technique. So say someone grabs your wrist, maybe to do something like an arm drag. So you can use this to get their arm off of you. And then of course, step in with the punch. Now you might be saying, okay, that's fair. But is that really? But you don't get taught that. And you're right. I didn't get taught that. I accidentally figured that out when I did this technique on reflex back when I was on the wrestling team. I ended up figuring out first day, because one, they didn't teach me any wrestling on the for the first few days, and they just threw me in and said basically said figure it out. I was lucky I had my jiu-jitsu to fall back on, but it works surprisingly well, and I still use it when I practice judo because I'm not that good at grip fighting. Of course, once they get a hold of your gi, you can't really break their grip all that easy, but it still works. And even if this doesn't work, you can still use. I'm gonna move over to this side now. You can still use this as a post. Say they shoot down to grab your legs, use this to post on them, and then step back before stepping in and striking. I'm not gonna actually throw that hand. Now, is this changing the technique? Yes, but I don't care. It's pretty much the same with some minor adjustments, and it works. Yeah, they shoot for your front leg. Get your hand on either their shoulder, maybe their head. Yeah, reposition your leg so they can't grab it, and strike. Those two are the most basic form of takedown defense in karate, basically, if you look at it from a practical sense. So, that is the bunkai that I came up for taikyoku shodan. If you have any other thoughts about this, let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, again, comment section down below. And just like to say this before I end the video, but the next kata is not going to be any more of the taikyoku katas because they're pretty much the same thing. Honestly, I'd say they're they have less bunkai than bunkai to talk about than taikyoku shodan. And so I'm going to skip the rest of the taikyoku katas and go into the heian katas, which are honestly more varied and honestly more interesting. So the next video will be on heian shodan. So, thank you all very much for watching. This is Random Man, signing off.